Chair now recognizes Representative Bera.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to enter into the record a letter dated yesterday from the president of the News Guild, just asking this committee to take a look and make sure the funds that are supposed to be restored actually get restored to the grantees. Thank you. Here's what bothers me about this. Reforms are fine and so forth, but I agree with my good friend from Texas, the Chairman Emeritus, Mr. McCall, about the importance of having tools like the Open Technology Fund that can translate, use the internet, use Instagram, et cetera, to get out there and get our message to places like China, et cetera. I agree with Chairman Smith. I mean, we've got to speak to the Chinese people about what's happening to the Uyghur population. We've got to have those tools. So eliminating those tools wholesale make us weaker as a country. That is a problem. And in fact, our Secretary of State penned an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal back in 2018 talking about how important what Radio Free Asia does is in exposing China's campaign against its Muslim minorities, the Uyghurs. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter that op-ed into the record, if I might. So here's the challenge. The ranking member raised, I think, what is a very important issue. We can debate, whether this should say an independent agency come back into the State Department or not, but the wholesale way of dismantling this agency, I think the chairman asked a legitimate question. What was the strategy? Was there a methodical approach to looking at the agency? What was effective, what was not effective? What should we be doing, what should we not be doing? Ms. Lake, can you provide kind of that methodical approach in terms of how the administration, how you looked at what essentially is a dismantling of this agency?
Yeah, we actually got to work after the 14th of March, and we put people on administrative leave and assessed what the statutory minimum was.
Can you provide us documentation of that so we can do our job as oversight?
In meetings and in discussions, we talked about
the minutes of those meetings and the documentation.
It would be emails and things of the such.
That's all stuff that we can take a look at as a committee as we do oversight. Again, I'm not against modernizing the agency. I'm not against looking at things. The challenge Mr. Keating touched on, we're in the middle of what is a war in the Middle East. Hopefully this ceasefire holds. Hopefully the Iranian people rise up and demand a better future. I've reserved judgment on the president's actions. I do want the administration to come brief us on what they're thinking, how this is unfolding. But absolutely, right now, we need all of our tools to communicate to the Iranian people. We need to do that through the radio, through the internet, through Instagram. I'm not a big TikTok fan. I supported the TikTok ban. But if folks are getting information on TikTok, we've got to be using that as well. I am very concerned that the personnel have been laid off, that we're working with a shoestring staff that is making us weaker and less effective at a moment of vulnerability for the Iranian regime, where this could be a time where the Iranian people choose to take a different path forward. What I would like to do and what I'd like a commitment to do, and I'd ask the chairman for this, is there was a time on this committee where we actually did do reforms. When I was a freshman member of Congress under Chairman Ed Royce, at that time ranking member Elliot Engel, we actually did do a bipartisan reform bill that I believe passed this committee unanimously and moved forward. That's our job. Ms. Lake, you should be working with us. We should not be dismantling an agency that we've seen over history has been super effective, whether it was in World War II, combating the Nazis in the Cold War, going against the repressive Russian or Soviet Union and the Communist Party. What I think the administration's doing and how they've approached this is making us weaker. And it is not a systematic way of thinking about how you reform and modernize things. I'd love to see the records, the minutes, the emails, so we can actually do our job in oversight. And I'd love for you to work, and Mr. Chairman, for us to work together in a bipartisan way to say, okay, in the 21st century, we do need tools to combat the propaganda that our enemies are putting out there. We do need to hire the best folks. We do need to have all of that. Again, Ms. Lake, I'd love your commitment to work with this committee, work with Congress to enact those reforms and share the information and what you're thinking.
Absolutely. It would be wonderful to work with you and to effectuate the president's executive order to reduce this agency down in size so that it's lean, mean, and effective. And I think it is effective. We were able to get information out into and translated into Farsi as to what was happening. We were able to get President Trump's address translated live as it was happening. You don't need a massive staff. This is the only newsroom in the world that hasn't seen cutbacks because we don't need to have massive newsrooms.
Again,
15,000
Right
people.
now, what I worry about, though, is we've let go of all this staff, and it isn't happening, and it's only happening.
We haven't let go
bits
of
and
all the
pieces.
staff, actually.
Gentleman's time has expired.
By the way, can I just mention something? I want to show you the newsroom, one of the newsrooms over at VOA. I don't know if you can see this. Empty. It's kind of a Where's Waldo. Can you spot the one person in there?
Not from here.
One person in the newsroom. And I know you're probably saying, yeah, thanks a lot, Kari. No, this was actually back during the Biden administration. I didn't hear any complaints coming from anybody when nobody was showing up for work at VOA, when one person was showing up in the middle of the week. One person showed up. And nobody on this committee, no Democrat said, why is there only one person in that newsroom? We need to get more people in the newsroom to get the story out. Nobody was showing up for work. And now that we are actually right-sizing an agency that has been bloated out of control and has never been right-sized, even though newsrooms all across this country.
Mr. Chairman?
I'm now going to recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, unanimous consent, just for clarification. Was that in the middle of COVID, by the way?
This was last November. So I think COVID was over.
Good question.
But the elections were, maybe it had something to do with the elections.
Well, I think you'd want to be in there if there was election. This is the middle of the week in November. I've been in newsrooms, they're actually really full during an election. But I know this newsroom was ready to attack President Trump. They were doing ads for Joe Biden. They were literally running Joe Biden ads
Mr. Chairman?
and
Whose time is
attacking
this?
President Trump.
Whose time is this?
Well, Mr. Keating just wanted a moment to ask a question, so I think she's responding to that.
I think it's
You're welcome
cutting
for
into
giving
your
more
time,
time.
Mr.
You're
Chairman.
welcome for giving more time to your side. Appreciate more